Hello again, and welcome to another very dangerous episode of Forbidden Knowledge. I'm your host, Craig, ready to slap you around for an hour tonight. We are on a live show tonight. If you're watching on Friday, this is a live show, and it's going to be one of the most interesting live shows probably ever seen on public access TV, let alone Ann Arbor itself. We are going to really mess with your mind tonight. I want some audience participation in this, please, because this is going to be rather interesting. I've been wanting to do this type of episode for many, many years. After a lot of research of my own, this is the first time I've attempted it, and I've decided to attempt to do it live. It's going to be one of the most amazing things you've ever seen. Now, some of you may suspect this. Before I get on all that topic, let's go back up a little bit and ask, within the last, let's say this century, let's call this century between the years 2000 and 2100. What is the most eventful, newsworthy thing worldwide that has happened so far in this century? Of course, we're only in 7 years into it, 7.5 years. But what is the most newsworthy event that's happened in this last 7 years, in this century? And don't even need callers on that. I think most everybody could probably agree the most worldwide newsworthy event this century has been the World Trade Center attacks, the so-called terrorist attacks on New York City and Washington, D.C., right? That's one thing, of course, that we have done on this show is completely blow that theory out of the water. And I call it a theory, a conspiracy theory, actually, because the government's story is nothing but theories. It doesn't hold any truth whatsoever. We've proved that many times on this show. So we don't need to visit. That's not what we're going to talk about tonight. What I want to ask you now, though, and think about this. This is a rather interesting question. The previous 100 years, let's say between the years 1900 and 1999, most of you are sure were alive during this period. What do you think is the most newsworthy event worldwide that happened in that 100-year period? Anybody want to take a stab at that before I just reveal it? We could use some audience participation calling on this because this is going to be a dynamite episode. I'm guaranteeing you folks. Call your friends and family, get them on the TV. Put the tape in, the VCR, if you still have one of those things, or fire up them DVD recorders, tape this. This is going to be a classic episode, hopefully, if we get some good audience participation. If we don't, I'll just go on and do the show anyway. But it would be nice if we had some audience participation. The number is on the screen, 994-2556. You want to call in? I sure hope that's the right number. Yes, it is, 994-2556. What do you think is the most newsworthy event in the last 100 years, century period? A lot of people, I'll tell you some of the things. I've done a couple lectures on this topic, actually. And here's the type of things I hear every once in a while. Since nobody's calling in, I'll do it myself. Somebody will say something like, oh, well, how about Pearl Harbor, okay? Well, it was a big newsworthy event, and yeah, and that was also a fake in a lot of ways because Roosevelt knew ahead of time about the attacks that were coming on Pearl Harbor. But think, this is a worldwide event that everybody paid attention to when it happened. I hear people say things like, oh, well, gosh, if you're going to say something like OJ, then you need to get a life. But I'm trying to think of some of the other main things that happen. I forget some of the things I hear on my lectures that I've heard before about this topic, but it was in the 60s. I was a little kid at the time. I didn't hardly remember this stuff, but I remember some of it, and I was really big into it. Happened in the 60s. Probably many of you were alive during that time period. Everybody's still drawing a blank about what I'm talking about? 1969, to be exact. What happened in 1969? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody wants to take that on? The most newsworthy event in world history, I would have to say, would be the moon landing. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Because NASA mooned you. Now, I'm going to prove what I say now. I don't like to come on this TV and tell you things that it may just be a theory, but I like to prove things. So let's prove some things here. Now, back when I was a child, and this came about, 1969, I do remember a little bit about it, and I was really hip into it, really excited to see that man was landing on the moon. I was so excited. I wanted to be the first astronaut on Mars and all that crap, so I was really big into it, watching as a little kid. So this was the most difficult thing for me to believe out of all the research I've ever done. It was the hardest thing for me to accept. Now, what I'm talking about here, let me tell you all also, what I'm talking about here happens to be the fact that we can demonstrate that man did not land on the moon or walk on the moon in the 60s and 70s like NASA claimed we did, or our government claimed we did. Now, I know that sounds preposterous on the surface. I know it really does. It sounded like that to me too until I researched it and I found out what the truth was. And that's what we're going to show you tonight. So like I say, get your tape recorders going or your DVD recorders going, because you will want to tape this. Call your friends and family right now. This will be a doozy, because I will prove it to you on the air tonight, live on TV, and hopefully we get some callers, because I want people to challenge me on this. Show me how ridiculous this idea is. A lot of people had thought about this back then, and I really hadn't heard anything about it until I started researching some of these other things that I do, the types of topics I cover on this show. This thing stumbled across me like a ton of bricks. We didn't land on the moon. That came from a very credible source that I heard this from. And I said, well, no, that can't be. This is ridiculous conspiracy theory nut stuff, you know. That's what you're thinking, probably most of you right now. But some of you, actually, there's been polls that suggest probably about up to a quarter of you in the population don't believe we actually landed on the moon. And I'd never heard that before. And when I started researching it, folks, I refused to accept it. I saw the proof in front of me. I researched it and I said, God, they're right. I looked at the research and said, they're absolutely right. But I refused to believe it. It's the hardest thing I had trouble with to get in my mind, to get past that wall, barrier in my mind. I didn't want to believe it. I set it aside for about a year, did all this other research, finding out all the other things that we talked about on the show, and found out how brain dead we all are. I found out through all my research. I went back and looked at the moon stuff, and then I was more able to accept it, because I realized the big farce of everything else that we saw in the press, how much we've been lied to our entire life by our families, our friends, our schools, the press, everything, radio, TV, newspapers, everybody was lying to us. So then I re-examined the moon stuff and realized, you know what? They're right. I can't deny it anymore. There's no sense in denying it. I was more able to accept it. And once I was able to accept this concept, because for me it was a big step, because I was really big into this stuff as a child. Once I was able to accept this concept that man did not walk on the moon in the 60s or 70s, I was able to start accepting a lot of these other crazy sounding ideas. But again, I don't accept anything on face value. I like to prove it. So we're going to prove it tonight. We're going to prove some things here tonight. This is, again, get your machines rolling. You want to catch this tonight, folks. This is a dynamite show. Okay, so let's start. Well, what we're going to talk about the moon, of course, that we've been talking about. What I want to show you here is, I'm in the studio alone here. This is a live episode. If you're watching on Friday, this is live. We're going to be examining some photographs of the moon from this book here. This book is called Full Moon. Let's get those numbers off there. Full Moon by, ironically enough, a man named Michael Light. You will see the significance of that later as we go into this program. But this is going to be the topic of our show today. This book called Full Moon by Michael Light. Now this book is available, at least it was. I haven't checked in about 2 years, at the Ann Arbor Public Library. You can go into the Ann Arbor Public Library. It's just official NASA photographs. It proclaims to be, the author has no clue, folks. And in fact, this guy is a photographer. This is what's really amazing. When you look at what we're talking about, we'll revisit that, because it'll be absolutely amazing to you to think that a photographer could put out a book like this and not catch it. I started seeing fake photographs in the newspapers after examining this. I started seeing all sorts of things that were faked. And this is before the age of solid computers now. This would have been, well, let's get into our first photograph. Again, from the book called Full Moon, we are going to be examining in detail some of the pictures shown in that book that can be seen on my presenter here, which you can't really see off screen, but we're going to be popping it in right now. Our first photograph is this one. Now, this is something we're going to have to deal with here. See this glare? You see like a glare from the lighting, and a glare up here. We're going to have to deal with that, folks. So the pages. This is just an open book. No matter what I do, there's still going to be some glare there, so we're going to have to deal with whatever we have. And my little book markers, don't pay much attention to those, but we're going to zoom in to this photograph and get some of the distracting things, because you got distracting elements out here. This is just part of the book, folks. This is a rather interesting book. All it is really, for the most part, it's like 95% photographs of the moon landing. Okay, so no conspiracy theory here. This author fully believes these are authentic. Well, they are authentic NASA photographs. At least this is what we were presented to be authentic. But look at this picture for a second. We're going to have to examine these. We're going to give you some time to look them over and call in if you like. We will put the number on the screen if you want to, if I can figure out how to do this here without really messing things up badly. There we go. Okay, this photograph here. What we are seeing is a picture taking of the surface of the moon. You see some of their tire tracks of the lunar lander, the lunar rover rather. And here we see a shadow. And I should have brought a pen in here to the studio with me. I'm really sorry I didn't. That should have been one thing I definitely should have did. But a shadow of the man taking the picture, presumably, in his spacesuit. Now, that would present the fact that the sun, which was the only light source according to NASA, was 90 million miles behind him. So he's taking a picture of his own shadow. That's what you're seeing there. You're seeing him taking a picture of the ground of his own shadow. So, what is wrong with this picture? Anybody want to take a stab at that? You can call me at 994-2556. Anybody? Anybody at all? We're going to go through these. We're going to spend some time on these, and we're going to make sure you really see how these photographs cannot be a representation of a man that has landed on the moon. It's a rather simple photograph, really. He's just taking a picture of the ground. Well, what is this? We'll have to use our fingers here, folks, because I didn't bring a pen or a pointer. How come this area here is bright and the areas around the sides are dark? What's up with that? Think about it. Think about it. They call these hot spots in the researchers' things. How can that happen? How can a light source that is 90 million miles behind him, roughly 90 million miles, the distance between the sun and the moon, how can a light source 90 million miles behind take such a photograph which has dark areas on the sides and bright area in the middle? How is that possible? Now, according to NASA, there were no other light sources brought to the moon by NASA's own admission. So what could that be? Now, one of the things I can hear you saying, those of you who haven't called in or are afraid to call in or whatever, let's make sure our phones are working here. Hello? Hello? No? Okay. We're ready to shock the hell out of everybody tonight. Why the bright area? Why? Anybody? Nobody can explain that, huh? I can't explain it. I don't know, I can't. I can't explain it. It can't be done with the light source 90 million miles behind. But something people say, quite often I hear, oh, that's a flash. That's what that is. That's a flash. Now, you got to remember, these cameras are being worn on their chests. They cannot point them down. They cannot point them up. They cannot yaw them. They cannot do anything other than move their bodies. Lean forward to point down, up to point up, etc. So why the bright spot? No flashes, because think about it, folks, the reason it can't possibly be a flash, not only NASA's own admission saying there was no flashes brought on these cameras, but also the fact that if it was a flash mounted on the camera on his chest, there would not be a shadow of the astronaut himself. Correct? Think about it, folks. Use your brain here. You don't have to be a photographer to understand these things. They call these hot spots. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at these photographs. When we see hot spots on the photographs, this is an indication of probably a very large light source behind the astronaut, like a spotlight. Doesn't it look like a spotlight to you folks? How come it's dark over here? How come it's dark over here? You got a nice black shadow here. How come you got shadow apparently here? Well, actually, to me, it looks like it's probably a spotlight. Pretty plain and simple. Anybody agree? Anybody disagree? Nobody wants to take me on this, huh? Numbers on the screen. Now, let's take another photograph. We're going to take another similar photograph. And let's back off here so you can see what I'm doing. No trickery here. This is just a book of supposed, according to the photographs, it's according to the book, the artist took these from NASA archives and first time published here. Okay, now this picture is very similar. Let's zoom in a little bit. Again, ignore the little glare here, folks, because we got bad glare here, and there's nothing I can really do about it at the moment. But look at this photograph a little bit. Now, we'll move it up a little bit. What is wrong with this picture? Now, based on what we just learned from the first picture, you can see, indeed, this picture has the same kind of problem, does it not? We have a hot spot. We have an area that is very bright around the astronaut, and then we have areas that are very dark elsewhere. Again, the light source is 90 million miles behind this guy taking a picture of the ground of his own shadow on the surface of the moon, supposedly. So why is, you see a shadow clearly still here. Why isn't it very bright here between his legs? Why isn't it very bright here, just like the rest of this is very bright? Why is that? Anybody? Nobody can challenge me on this, huh? Numbers on the screen. This has the same problem. Hot spot. Looks like a spotlight behind him. And they didn't quite fill up the whole screen. Amazing. But there's another problem with this picture. Anybody spot it? Another major goof up. Anybody? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? How about this rock up here? Look carefully. What's wrong with this picture? Literally. What is wrong with this picture? Let me zoom in on that, because you're going to have to look at that closer. And we can zoom in really close here. What's wrong with this picture? Supposedly a rock on the surface of the moon, folks. How come the shadow is going in a different direction? That's what I said. Look at it again. Look at the overall picture again. We've got a shadow 90 million miles behind the astronaut. But yet you have a rock here. This is displaying a shadow like the sun is from this direction, going this way. What's wrong with this picture? But it gets worse, folks. Look at this rock. Look at it. Zoom in. What gives? That's absolutely another impossibility. A shadow from a third direction. We have shadows in one photograph going in 3 different directions. What in the world is wrong with this picture? Obviously something is going on there. Not your typical picture, not even just a typical spotlight. We have 3 shadows in different directions on the same photograph, folks. Something is very wrong here. Would you say that? Look carefully. Look carefully. I'm not making this up, folks. Look at the shadow direction of that rock. There's the astronaut. And look at the shadows over here. That is not the same sun. Oh, well, maybe there were 3 suns out that day. That must be it. There must have been 3 suns out that day. I'm sorry, we don't really know what happens on the moon. There had to have been 3 suns. That's got to be what it was, right? You see, folks, NASA mooned you. Let's go to another picture. Let's just go to the next page. How's that? This has got a really good picture here. Oh, let's let me widen this out a little bit so you can see what's going on. Let's go with and notice the footprints. We've seen. I really can't tell you anything wrong with this picture on the surface of it, so to speak. It's just a footprint, but you see how the soil is, how it's like a sand, like a powdery, like not even sand. Let's not view these pictures at the moment. Let's go with, I'll revisit that later. Again, we can take time on every single one of these pictures and show you things wrong with it. But I'm going to show you another concept that is going to be, this one's going to be hard to understand, so I'm going to have to explain what this is, what you're seeing here tonight. This is the bottom of the lunar lander. The lunar lander looks like that, right? Okay, it's got the four legs on the sides. It's got the gold foil and everything. This happens to be a black and white picture, but you can see one of the legs here. There's the leg, and there's the foot pad on the surface of the moon. Okay, here's that gold foil, which is, again, this is a black and white photo, so you see it as looks like aluminum foil, silver colored. What you're seeing here is the bottom of the underside. You can't see the other leg. The other leg is off screen. You can't see, it's a very close up of the underside of the lunar lander. Now what we have right here, this dark area, it's hard to see. You see this curved section down here, and then the cutoff here, and if you can see behind this thing, you can see another. That's what they call the descent engine bell. Descent engine bell. That's the rocket, essentially, that allows them to descend on the moon. It's a rocket that will keep the thrust at a certain level in order to safely land on the moon. Okay, produces much, I forget the numbers because it's been years since I researched all this, many thousands of pounds of thrust, okay, to get this to safely land on the moon. Now, we know by previous photographs and all sorts of photographs you may see on other publications such as your National Geographics of the day or whatever. Let's look at one of these footprints here. Look at these footprints. You can see how they're indentated quite a bit here. like go sinking in at least an inch or two, right? Okay, very soft soil, very soft, let's call sandy soil, powdery soil. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture? Think about it, think about it, think about it. Anybody? Anybody? Anybody will call in? Hello? Am I slapping you around too much tonight? Think about it. What's wrong with this picture? Zoom in. How come, again, there's the descent engine bell down here, this big dark black figure here, the curved bottom. The descent engine bell produces all that thrust to get this machine down on the ground safely, and yet we see no disturbance of these very soft powder-like substance of the moon underneath the descent engine bell. Duh. What's wrong with that? Somebody made a mistake there, wouldn't you say? Again, right next to it we have these footprints. Show a great indentation, showing how soft it is. So why do we have nothing under the descent engine bell? Doesn't seem to be a problem at all there, does there? And we finally have somebody calling in. Somebody going to challenge me on this? Let's hope so. And let's see if we can do this. Hang on, caller. I'm here by myself, as you all know. We are live on the air. And caller, you are on the air, caller.
Yes, I was just calling. I just was flipping through the stations and I saw you discussing these photos here. And I just wanted to know, is your premise that the moon landing was fake? Is that what you're doing today?
That certainly appears to me. Now, what we're doing is we're trying to prove that the moon landing is fake. Now, so far, all we've done is prove that there's some fake photographs. But that should tell you a lot in itself, and there's a lot of things wrong with their story. But yes, that's essentially what we're doing here.
Okay. Well, I will continue to watch, and you're doing a good job.
Okay, thanks for calling. Okay, folks, let's go back to our photographs. Again, this is the descent engine bell on the bottom of the screen here, and it has nothing disturbed under the soil, if we want to call it soil. Whereas right here, just a few feet away, we have footprints that are obviously very soft soil. So something is wrong with this picture. Obviously, something is wrong with this picture. Again, we're looking at the bottom of the lunar lander. You can see one of the legs right here, the foot pads and the legs going up here. It's a close-up. Something is wrong with this picture. There's other things wrong with this picture too, but we're going through some of the most obvious things. This picture here, we'll just skim over this one briefly. This one here's got a problem in that, and here you have to know a little bit about, I guess, atmospheric conditions in science. And there's no atmosphere on the moon yet, and when there is no atmosphere, there can be no halo of light in a no atmosphere, in a vacuum. Okay, that's one thing wrong with this photograph. Another thing would be wrong with this photograph is, well, here we have the shadow. The sun is supposedly behind the lunar lander, casting it in this direction, so it produces a huge shadow towards the camera. Well, why is the dark side of this lunar module all lit up like a Christmas tree? Must have had some backlighting, wouldn't you say? Again, no atmosphere. Their extreme contrasts should be a silhouette only. You should basically only see a silhouette along with the shadows of the legs, the shadows of the lander itself. You should only see silhouettes. Let's go to another picture here. Here's another interesting thing. And we won't go into the details about some of these because we don't have a whole lot of time on this show tonight. We only got an hour show. This is a picture of an astronaut, obviously, and I'm hoping the automatic zoom continues to work properly because I see it's been messing up here on occasion. Let's zoom in now. One thing about the spacesuits, let's actually move to a bigger picture, a bigger photograph of the spacesuits so you can see a little bit better. NASA says that the spacesuits used in the Apollo missions were inflated to 5 psi. See where I'm going with this already, folks? Inflated to 5 psi because without a vacuum in space, I mean with a vacuum in space, like I should have said, there is no pressure within the suits unless they supply pressure. So these indeed were inflated to about 5 psi according to NASA. Now here on Earth, I believe we have about 15 pounds pressure if I recall my science classes or my research on this. So this is in order to keep the astronauts alive, so you have to produce a certain amount of pressure in the suits. Now look at this suit. Have you ever inflated something? Let's say, let's relate this to an inner tube. Okay, have you ever tried to inflate an inner tube to 5 psi? You certainly can't inflate it to 30 psi because it'll grow 100 times the size, or it'll burst before then. But if you try to inflate like a tire is something else because that's made to withstand the pressure. But and this would be supposedly able to withstand 5 psi. But if you look at the suit, the gloves, the arm, the groin area, the leg, does that thing look like it's puffed up at all? And if you were to puff up something like this, now presumably this is, I can forget what it's made of, Kevlar and a lot of other high-tech materials of the day. Presumably this would be inflated, and when something like this is inflated, you essentially would not be able to bend your fingers. You would not be able to bend your arms without any kind of reasonable dexterity like you're seeing in this photograph. I submit to you that these probably are not inflated whatsoever in this photograph, if at all, probably only about a half psi. Try inflating an inner tube once to 5 psi. The thing will probably burst before it inflates to 5 psi, and it'll grow so big it'll be absolutely ridiculous. And if this should look like the Michelin Man, you know, like that character on TV. The suit should be blown up like the Michelin Man. It shouldn't look so like that. And then look at this. Look at his proverbial ass there and his legs. Tell me that thing is blown up to 5 psi. Okay, again, something's wrong with this picture, folks. And again, all these pictures generally have something wrong. For those of you that are just joining us, we are looking at photographs from NASA. These are supposedly official NASA photographs from this book that you can get at the Ann Arbor Public Library. At least it was there a couple of years ago, called Full Moon. And now you see the irony of this photographer's name, who is Michael Light, and he doesn't have a clue. He's saying how wonderful these pictures are and how NASA did such a great job with these photographs. Well, yes, they did such a great job, except the fact that they missed a lot of little details that a lot of us researchers can find out about and show the rest of the world how, well, something is wrong with these photographs. They were indeed faked. And I'm making that obvious here tonight. All right, let's look at some more photographs. Let's see, we've already went through this one. Let's just go down the line here. Here's one that has a similar kind of problem with shadows. I should just let you determine for me what's wrong with these pictures. Again, ignore the glare. That's the page, that's the light from the page. Glossy paper. Here we have a shadow behind him, but look at these shadows aren't parallel. See how this shadow appears to be running this direction and this shadow appears to be running this direction? Now something else that we're going to look at in these photographs, and you can see also up here how the shadow doesn't quite match, but it's harder to see. But let me zoom into this area here. There's these things called reticles, I believe is how you say them. Or you might call them, say they're called crosshairs, like such. Crosshairs, okay, like you might see in a scope of a gun. Crosshairs, crosshairs. In the middle, there's a much larger crosshair. It's kind of hard to see because of the graphics on this thing here, but there's a larger crosshair in the center, and then every so often in a grid pattern, there's these other crosshairs which can be seen all throughout the photograph when there's anything light colored to be able to see them with. So these reticles, let's just call them crosshairs for simplicity's sake, so everybody knows what I'm talking about. These are within the camera. In other words, you have the photographic paper. Remember, this is not in the age of digital, folks. Photographic paper inside the camera, and then you have the screen with the reticles on it, and then you have the going through the lenses, etc. So these are produced within the camera. So if they are produced within the camera, what is wrong with this picture? Hello? Oops. Remember, these are within the picture. These are created inside the camera. Why does that happen? We got some other photographs to show that same effect. Where the reticles, where the crosshairs are actually behind the topic subject being photographed. Okay, let's go through some more of these, folks. If you're just joining us, you are watching a show called Forbidden Knowledge. I wonder why it's called that. Show called Forbidden Knowledge here on CTN Channel 17. If you're watching on Friday, and this is probably the kind of show I should put on Friday the 13th, but if you're watching on Friday, indeed, we are live. If you're doing some channel surfing here, what we're doing is we're attempting to prove to you that man did not land on the moon in 1969. If you want to go to the website, it's very important that you get some feedback for this show, please. It's www.forbiddenknowledge.info. And if you want to email me, the number, the address is right there, and we do have another caller, and we will take that caller now. Caller, you are on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to say that there should have been dust on the pads, the foot pads of the lunar module, and there wasn't anything on top of those.
That's right. Anything else?
No, that's it. Good night. You're doing great.
Thanks for the call. Indeed. Correct. That's one thing I forgot. Again, there's so many things wrong with these photographs, folks, that it's not hard for other people to pick out things. Let's look at that. So, because the caller did bring that up, there's one of the pads right there. Looks pretty shiny. Now, pictures they supposedly show of the lunar lander landing on the moon. Of course, well, now, you know what, caller? We may be assuming something wrong here because there was no dust kicked up. Look underneath the descent engine bell. There was no dust kicked up. But, of course, they showed us that some of them were kicking up dust. Some of the supposed landings were kicking up dust, and which, of course, created a huge cloud in the air. Even though there's no atmosphere, the dust will still go in the air and will still come down. And yes, indeed, you're right. That should have been probably covered with dust. So the caller is correct in that assumption. And we have another caller. And caller, you are on the air.
Hello. It seems to me that Mr. Light has done a really bad job of retouching his photographs, maybe.
So you believe these are retouched?
Yes.
Okay, according to his book, in the text of it, they are not retouched. They're presented to you as he got them from NASA. That's his explanation anyway.
Well, maybe NASA did?
Well, from what I'm showing you, there's obviously something wrong with these photographs. Whether NASA, however they created them, I don't know. I can only speculate on that. But indeed, this gentleman here, and if I could find the page, I could read the paragraph to you. He got these photographs straight from NASA, the archives. These hadn't been published before. He assembled them in this book and presented them to you unedited as he got them from NASA. This is his explanation in his own book.
I see. Well, thank you.
Thanks for the call. It's good questions, folks, though, because this is obviously a touchy topic because it cuts through everything you've ever known. It's like we've been so blind all our lives about this stuff. Let's look at some more pictures here. And sorry about this is again a live show. So there's all sorts of photographs here. We won't dwell on a lot of them for very long because this is only another half hour left in the show, less than half hour. You're watching a show called Forbidden Knowledge. All right, here's, let's go wider on this one because this is actually two photographs assembled. So you could say with a little bit of uncertainty about the directions of the shadows. We got obviously two different directions of the shadows, very different. You see this white pole thing here, and then the shadow going this way, and then the shadow behind him. Again, the sun is 90 million miles behind these subjects. Why are the shadows not parallel? You have a light source 90 million miles away. These shadows should be indeed parallel. Now, being this is two photographs assembled together, you have to take some of that into account. So this one isn't an extremely obvious one, but let's see here. There's things wrong with a lot of these photographs here. Okay, now here's one that we have. It's interesting. I want to show you about this line of demarcation. We see this in a lot of the photographs as well. But what I'm talking about here is the mountain ranges. Whenever the mountain ranges appear on these photographs, we see a line of demarcation. What I'm talking about is here the transition between supposed lunar soil here and mountain in the back. There always seems to be like a relatively like a line in between where indeed it doesn't seem quite natural. It always seems like a abrupt change. Let's scan across the photograph here and just look how this line basically continues all across where mountain meets soil. And here they're way off in the distance. See? And what do we have here? We have a lunar lander way off in the distance. But what's wrong with this picture? Everybody should be able to pick this out by now. Hello? Look at those crosshairs behind the subject matter. And these crosshairs indeed are inside the camera. That's how they're produced. They're inside the camera. Lots of things wrong here, folks. And this book, if you get a chance, go to the library, check it out. I think it's in the reference section, at least it was. It's very dog-eared, not like this copy. But it actually has centerfolds, a whole bunch of them actually. If you want to call them centerfolds, they have very interesting pictures here. They're very nice pictures, actually. Too bad they're fake. Here we have an astronaut. And you have to think to yourself, these are supposedly assembled, these photographs are assembled. Both astronauts are here, so who's taking this picture? Well, that could be explained in other ways. So, but just think about that sort of thing when you see these photographs. If you see two astronauts in the same picture, you got to wonder who's taking the picture. This particular photograph is it's typical also of the backlighting effect. Notice that the sun, which is 90 million miles away, is behind him, casting his shadow on the ground in front of him. So why is he lit up like a Christmas tree? Essentially what you should be seeing here is like another shadow upside down of what you're seeing down here. You should essentially see black down here and black up there because there is no atmosphere to refract the light, and hence you wouldn't have him lit up nearly as much as he is. And in fact, if you look very closely in his helmet, let's zoom in on his helmet, you can indeed see some idea that, and so if this thing will focus for me correctly, it's automatic, you see like a bright spot where indeed there might be an indication of a light source, like a hot spot again, like we saw in some of the other photographs. Again, question me, question everything, but look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. It's absolutely amazing, folks. And on this photograph too here we have the line of demarcation. Let's zoom in a little bit more here. Any of these pictures with the mountain ranges, we see this line of demarcation going across where it looks like a line separating the mountains from the ground, because apparently it was hard to hide this. Okay, centerfolds again, lots of them. We've got lots of good pictures here, and this is just one book. You can take all your National Geographics or whatever pictures you may have of the moon. You can find out a lot of things wrong with them. You might have them in your own home to look at your leisure. Show your friends. You want to slap people around? This is a good way to slap people around. Line of demarcation again. Now, a photo like this, folks, this might be a real photo. I don't know. I can't find anything wrong with it. But I also don't see any people in it, or lunar landers, or rovers, or anything else. I don't doubt that we sent probes to the moon to take a picture such as this. This might be an authentic photograph. I don't know. I can't find anything wrong with it. Let's see here. We have problems with all these, but I'm going to skip ahead here. Here's another nice centerfold. And here we have, I'm showing you about that line of demarcation again between ground and mountain. Almost seems like a line going across there. And indeed, you'll find these same mountain ranges in the videos. It's very interesting, folks. In the videos, you see a lot of things wrong too. You will see these same lines in the videos, the same mountain ranges used in different scenes from different missions. Duh. We couldn't notice that, could we? Well, you can put them, superimpose them together, and you'll find that exactly the same mountain ranges. So they use the same backdrop, just varied them, shook them up a little bit. Use the same ones for Apollo 11 through 17. So anyway, that's something I can't show you because I don't have videos queued up for me. Here's more. Let's find some more things wrong that you can see with these types of pictures. Here's another one. This is a good one. This is a good one. Let's show you that line of demarcation. This one goes all across the whole screen too, by the way, folks. The line of demarcation between the mountain range and the soil. I can't call it Earth. Can't even call it moon, probably. I probably could call it Earth, actually. Like a line between the mountain ranges, okay? But look at this. Look at this. I shouldn't have to tell you what's wrong with this picture, folks. You should know it by now. Are you paying attention? Hello? Anybody see anything wrong with that? Oops, somebody messed up. Remember back in the 60s, we had something called transparencies? Isn't that what that looks like to you? Like a transparency laid out on this photograph? Might be a real photograph of the moon, although I doubt it because of that line of demarcation in the mountain ranges. When you see those reticles, those crosshairs behind the subject matter, here's another good line of demarcation, and I guess I don't have to dwell on the same types of things, but we see them in all the photographs. Anytime you see a mountain range, you see that looks kind of like a line going across. So it's actually fairly apparent, and this is something you can find out yourself. Another interesting thing about these photographs that isn't ever talked about either, and all the photographs from space. Look at this up here. Just any of the black area. Now, this is not a mistake, folks. We're not on black screen. This is actually space. This is a picture of space. See my finger here? This is actually a picture of space, but yet there's no stars. No stars. No stars whatsoever, and we're in space, supposedly. So that's something else you have to wonder about. Why isn't there any stars? Now, this is something that would have been extremely hard for them to fake because amateur astronomers would just love to go over all this stuff and find out directions and times of day and just would have a ball with that kind of thing. So I would presume NASA decided to avoid the topic altogether and just not have any stars in the background, because actually without an atmosphere and without the refraction from the atmosphere, you would see that would be a very difficult thing to show on the screen. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is, on the moon, the stars would be brilliant because of the lack of atmosphere. Even in full sunlight, the stars would be brilliant. Absolutely would be an amazing sight. Look like Christmas tree lights all across the sky. Millions more than you could see here on Earth. But yet, in all the massive photographs, we essentially see nothing but black in these photographs when it comes to the moon photos. Again, black everywhere, no stars. Here's another centerfold here. Here, look at the spacesuit here. Remember I was telling you about pressurized suits, 5 psi according to NASA. Look at the area here. Does that look like it's inflated to 5 psi? Actually, with it inflated to 5 psi, these guys would not be able to move around. Looks like your blue jeans at home, doesn't it, folks? Not inflated to 5 psi, obviously. Something's wrong with these pictures. What's wrong is they're fake. That's what's wrong with them. Line of demarcation, very obvious with the mountains. We're going to open up phone lines here in a second again. There's lots of various photographs, and again, all these have little problems, but we're not going to go through all of them because we've already examined. There's lots of mountain range problems in this picture. This is like a long panoramic scene, and you see that line going all the way across the mountains. No stars anywhere. Here you see supposed halos from the sun, but of course there is no atmosphere, so there should be no halos. And here's where we started it all out, folks, on this page here coming up. Oh, by the way, lunar lander, that's the door, with their suits inflated to 5 psi. Think about this, folks. With their suits inflated to 5 psi, and you do some measurements from NASA's own equipment, and you've seen pictures of it, and I don't have a picture of it here. Lunar lander, lunar module, the door, if you can see past this imaginary halo here, there's the door to the lunar lander, the LEM. If you take a measurement of this, folks, you'll find that it is indeed too small to fit through. An astronaut with a full gear cannot fit through this doorway. And with it inflated, when you see the layout, the interior of this module, you will see that you have to take a right-hand turn, you have to get on your knees, you have to back out. It's absolutely incredible to think that an astronaut with a suit inflated to 5 psi that wouldn't be able to fit with that backpack on the backs could actually make it through this lunar lander, lunar module to get in and out of there. So, and that can be proven scientifically, taking measurements as well, folks. It just couldn't happen. Now, a deflated spacesuit, you might be able to get through there. A deflated spacesuit, you crunch through there and scrape the edges and everything, you might be able to make it through there. But with the backpacks on and inflated, no way, no how, you've been mooned. Okay, I'm going to open up the phone line some more now here. Let's get the information on the screen. I want to hear some people feedback. I want to hear you tell me how crazy I am, how much of a nut I am to think that we could have possibly not have landed on the moon, because there's a lot of reasons why. It's just one of those things that we've been ingrained in our heads. We're told to believe. We believe things on the TV for whatever reason. This is like the most important news of actually not just the last century, but of man's history, really, when you think about it. And we do have a caller, and the lack of calls recently has been because I haven't had it on the screen. I realize that, but let's take a call. Tell me how crazy I am, folks. Caller, you are on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to say that as far as motive from the government, the millions or billions and billions of dollars of funding that went into their pockets is a big enough motive. And I also wanted to say, I really wonder about how we could think that that small module could have the power enough to escape the gravitational pull of the moon to get all the way back to Earth, because there isn't an awful lot there. There's not a huge power pack like the rocket that they showed us at NASA to launch it. There doesn't seem to be enough of an energy source to get all the way back to Earth.
I agree with you. Anything else?
No.
Okay, thanks for the call. Oops, sorry, folks. Numbers back on the screen. A couple points about what the caller just said. She is correct. Several things, actually. The lunar lander was never successfully tested here on Earth. There were tests made attempting to get the thing. They could never get the thing under control. When you think about this lunar lander with a rocket on the bottom of it, okay, if I can do this to get you to understand, if a rocket on the bottom of it, everything's top heavy because the rocket's on the bottom. It'll want to yaw. It'll like crazy. It'll like flip, and that's indeed what happened. Neil Armstrong actually had to bail out testing the thing once. They were never able to successfully get it off the ground. They got it off the ground. They were never able to control it whatsoever. And we're expected to believe that it happened 7 times. Apollo 11, 12, 13 was supposed blunder. 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. 6 times. 6 times supposedly just perfectly and landing on the moon when they couldn't even get it to test properly on Earth once. Neil Armstrong had to bail out and the thing destroyed. They never got it to work. Okay, another thing about what she said. What else did she say? Oh, I'm sorry, because she had some really good points there. The lunar module power, I can't speak to that necessarily. It'd be hard for me to explain on that. Oh, motive. Think about this, folks. Russians. Remember, we were in this supposed race with the Russians. Russians are the first satellite launched into space, the first man in space, the first spacewalk, the first space station, the first woman in space, everything. They were first. And then all of a sudden with the moon, nothing. Whoa, what happened? How come nothing happened? How come they didn't continue on the moon? They had their own moon program. We saw prototypes of all their landers and everything else they had. They were going to go to the moon. They had all the evidence there. Well, here's what happened. I can't prove this on the air. You have to do a lot of research to find out this. In 1965, I think it was, and I hope I'm right on the year, we had 2 cosmonauts come back dead. Now, the official explanation was indeed a stuck valve on re-entry that depressurized the cabin and they came back dead. But when you look at the research and find out what really happened, this is the amazing part, folks. They came back burned to death. And I don't mean burned by fire, I mean burned by radiation. Because here's a key point with the moon, folks. Here's a key point. Because I say to you that we not only have not been to the moon, this is my speculation about this, but we also can't get to the moon and we can't get to Mars. When you talk about Mars, it's total bull crap and you should ignore it as being an agenda behind it. Radiation. You see, there's something in a region of space called surrounding the Earth called the Van Allen belts. This is a region of space that protects the Earth from radiation. Once you go past those Van Allen belts, you are no longer protected from the radiation of the sun, and you will indeed be cooked, burned to death. And this is what happened in 1960, whatever, I think it's 65. 2 cosmonauts came back burned to death, irradiated, exposed to radiation because they ventured for the first time beyond the Van Allen belts. Now keep in mind, Space Shuttle and all the other missions we've had, the space station, these are all below the Van Allen belts, which offers the protection for the astronauts from radiation from the sun. Now, these spacesuits are so great, so excellent to protect us from radiation. Remember, the space capsule is only like the lunar lander, they said you could punch your hand through it. That's how thin it was. Very thin sheet metal, and it's been estimated you would need about 6 feet of lead in order to protect yourself in that region of space beyond the Van Allen belts to protect any form of life to not to be irradiated to death. So any mission that goes beyond the Van Allen belts, and I forget how many miles it is in space, but it's below the space station, below all the other missions. Now, all these other missions that were robots, that's a whole different story, folks. I tend to believe most of those. I can't prove we really did send all these probes everywhere. I hope it's true. I'm believing it, but I can't prove it to be false. So, but I can prove that, well, what I've done proved here tonight, folks, is that the photographs have been faked. So that has to bring into question a lot of things. And when you look at a lot of it, there's hundreds of things wrong with the moon story, the theory that we landed on the moon. That's what I have to call it, folks. I have to call it a theory because there's, just like September 11th, there's hundreds of things wrong why this couldn't possibly have happened under our current technology. Now, there may be something that I don't know about. I happen to believe that I don't talk about UFOs and aliens and everything else on this program, but I happen to believe there are no aliens. I don't think they could get here. I think the radiation issue is the same with them. I don't believe there are these craft from outer worlds. I believe these are secret craft, our own government, members, elements of our own, that's controlling our own government. I shouldn't say it's even our government. People that are controlling our own government have access to this, what we think of as UFOs, because so many thousands of people have seen these are, certainly there's something there. This is what I believe. I can't prove this, but I believe there is technology out there that we're not privy to. They're actually about 50 to 100 years beyond the technology of what you see today in front of you. Having said that, this technology that's portrayed in Apollo could not have been utilized to land on the moon. Now, if this other technology that we don't know about, that I can only speculate about, can protect astronauts from radiation, then maybe indeed somebody somewhere in time in our history has landed on the moon, man. But it certainly wasn't during the Apollo missions. I'm telling you, folks, it's an absolute farce. The biggest news of the last century is also a lie. That should be another slap in the face to all of you about how bad we're lied to in the press all the time, all our lives. Because the most biggest news stories of the world are absolutely lies. Now, here's what I think happened. I can't prove it, but we saw a spacecraft go up, Apollo 11, let's say. We saw a spacecraft go up. Whether or not there were people in there, I don't know. There probably were. Let's say the spacecraft was launched, orbited the moon, came down, splashed down, 14 days later, however many days they said they were up there and on the moon and so on. However many days later, splashed down, and we're just not privy to what really happened. Here's another thing. A lot of you don't understand this, and probably never will without doing a lot of research about secret societies. These have said by some insiders to have filmed in the Walt Disney Studios. I don't know if that's true or not. That's a rumor, essentially. And Walt Disney happened to be a 33rd degree Freemason. The highest level you can attain in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the 33rd degree, is really symbolic. But most people can only attain the level of 32nd degree. And if you look in the history and the research of the astronauts, all the astronauts in Mercury, Gemini, Apollo were 32nd. Well, actually, let me correct that. Let's just say Apollo for now, because I don't remember for sure about the other ones. We're 32nd degree Freemasons. 32nd degree Freemasons, Apollo astronauts. That will be a good point in time, since I'm not getting any calls, to present to you this video clip without sound at first, which is queuing up, I guess. It should come on any second because I did hit play and I've done something wrong, obviously. Let's try this. No. Oh, I'm sorry. This is obviously not a good thing when your prearranged video does not show up. That is not a good thing because that's where it should be. I'm real sorry, folks. Let's put it on pause and let's see if I can figure this out in the seconds I have here, and I can't figure it out. Oh, that's a shame because I had a really good clip to show you, which is not there. Let's see if the sound is there. Sound is not there either, folks, so I've obviously done something very wrong. And it won't be there, and it won't be there. So it should be there, and it's not. So this is a very big disappointment. Anyway, I guess I can't do that. And it's going to bother me now that I can't figure out what I did wrong because it should be entirely right. And unless I see what happened, I see what happened. Okay. And what I'm going to have to do is, this is live TV, folks, obviously. What we're going to do here is back it up, and I'm going to show it to you anyway, even though I've made a mockery of myself. And you can't see what I'm doing here, but I got a remote control here. This is William Cooper. Beyond the Pale Horse, William Cooper, very famous guy, murdered in 2001 listen to this. This is absolutely incredible. This relates to the Masons and secret societies. See if you can figure this out at all. Study it. You'll learn more. I'm going to put music on there too.
Drugs, the NEA and public schools. They've taken your brightest and our best and made them public fools. With managed media, brain-bending lies and stealth, the banksters stole your wealth. Johnson, Bush, Carter, Reagan, Gore, and Dan, they've all been pushing Pike's Masonic master plan. Rhodes Scholar oration. Clinton speaks, then rapes the nation. Luciferian subjugation, New World Order, Illuminati coronation, mass media grand ovation, orders of the quest, think they're superior, they think that they're the best.
And you're inferior, you little pest.
Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key, Knights Templar, Harvard University, they're the Faustian fraternity. Knights of the Golden Circle, Ancient Order of the Rosencross, CFR, Albatross.
In both parties, Rockefeller's boss.
MK Ultra, ISA from the OSS to the CIA. Mass murder is the game they play. Galileo, NASA, Jupiter, Plutonium 2000, dual sun. They'll call it Lucifer for fun. Pyramid Giza, Hitler called it a Luciferian millennium. 1,000 points of light.
Love of Rome, Thunderdome, ISIS, Horus, Lucis, Trust. If the UN lives, y'all go bust.
Wake up stupid and read the scoop. Mullen, Sutton, Griffin, and tune in to Coop. Conran, Cardinal, Kisei. Bohemian Grove, Beverly Hall, Lord Betraya, they want it all.
Yeah, they want it all.
Kissinger, Gingrich, Army, Buckley, Dole, New World Order, authoritarian control.
Counterfeits. That's their role.
Okay, folks, that is obviously very advanced knowledge that is good. That would take many episodes actually to explain to you what all that meant. I'm hoping some of you study that, learn what's happening, because see, that's how people can keep a secret. These secret societies, nobody knows how to build an F-16, but hundreds of people assembled together, engineers, know how to build an F-16. By combining their efforts, can put together an F-16. The same sort of deep compartmentalization could have happened with the moon situation. You see, there's lots of ways to explain this. I don't know what really happened, but we didn't land on the moon, folks, not at least the Apollo space missions. But they're blinders. They're studying. You have somebody just studying fuel pressures. You got somebody just studying heart rate of the astronauts. You have somebody electrical systems, whatever. They're all compartmentalized. They can't see what's going on. Somebody from above puts it all together and pretends. Why did the Russians stop their space program? Think about that, folks. Their 2 astronauts came back dead. They realized it couldn't be done with the current technology. So they literally abandoned it. They were first on everything. Everything. They were ahead of us. The supposed space race, right? They were ahead of us. They were just so far ahead of us, like a year. Everything, they were just kept getting ahead. We were trying to catch up. And then all of a sudden with the moon, nothing. Well, they tried. But as soon as they went out of Earth orbit past the Van Allen belts, they found out it could not be done. That's obviously very interesting, folks. I can't really take any calls because the show's just about over, but there is the website. Please visit it. The website is forbiddenknowledge.info. We need to get this. This is obviously a very important program. We need support of the audience. I could do shows like this, thousands of shows similar to this. This is the first time we've attempted to tackle this topic like this live on the air. It's the first time I did an episode like this live on the air, but I've always wanted to because it's absolutely incredible to show how badly we've been lied to. This show is just about over. Please visit the website. There's no time to call in. If you want to call in after the show's over and talk to me off the air, that's fine. Give me a call. Write down that number because we're off the air in 30 seconds. This was live Friday. Get your relatives to watch this show. If this you're watching right now re-airs Tuesday at 10 a.m. Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Channel 17 right here. You can catch the show again. So if you missed it, tape it Tuesday 10 a.m. You've been watching Forbidden Knowledge. And now you know why it's forbidden. Because we tell you the truth where nobody else does. And that's actually very dangerous. The most dangerous show on public access called Forbidden Knowledge. I'm your host, Craig. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned next time. This is going to be incredible.